Welcome to the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. My name's Nick.
And I'm Elizabeth.
And thanks for joining us. You can follow us on social media if you want to. We're at Fancounters Live on Twitter. We're at Fancounters and Sharpie Nation on Facebook. And you can also
email us at hello@fancounters.com.
On the show this week, we've got somebody that I'm very excited to talk to. Her name is Cindy Begel, and we will tell you more about her in just a moment. But first, let's talk about the 48-Hour Film Festival. A couple weeks ago, I entered myself into a 48-Hour Film Festival, and not sure if I regret it or not. At first, I started to regret it because
you had 48 hours.
It was 48 hours without any prep. And I thought, how do people get their team together? How do you know how many people you want in your cast? How do you know all this stuff, like locations?
You can do nothing before the competition.
You are not supposed to.
Okay.
I think you can assemble a team. I think you can get locations.
Okay.
That's really all I did.
Okay.
I recruited a bunch of people I thought might show up, and I said, Friday night, I might email you and say, I don't need you.
Okay.
So I got my school that I work at as a location in my house. So
Okay.
that's what I used. So we did. We were very successful. Friday night, we got our genre, which was either an action-adventure film or holiday.
Oh, all right.
So what do you think I picked?
You picked holiday.
Of course I did, because I love Hallmark Christmas movies.
Right, because it's Christmas and you love Christmas.
I've seen like 10 of them already.
Okay,
so
we'll come back to that in a minute.
Okay, so holiday. The character I had to use was named Van Quinn. He had to be a financial advisor.
Okay.
So you got to work Van Quinn into the story somehow.
Okay.
All right. I had to use a coffee pot.
Okay.
No problem there. And the line in my film that I had to use was an odd one. It was, that starts with me forgetting you. That was the line I had to work into the script.
Okay.
All right. So what I did was because I like my family genre and I like my holidays, so we set it at Christmas time. I had a daughter waking up to a very crabby dad who was mad that she was using her cell phone in bed again and not going right to sleep. He then misses her Christmas concert, so she runs out of the school, runs into the street, and gets hit by a car.
How is this a Christmas movie?
Because then Santa, the very next scene, comes down the hallway of the school to console the dad and says, what if I could send you back in time so you can save your daughter? And he's like, this is never going to happen. Why would this happen? So he gives him a button, and we do the whole rewind effect. So we play the movie that everything you just saw in reverse really fast. And we end up back at the very first shot of my house for the home scene of the movie. And we start over. And the dad, right before he's about to bang on the door, thinks twice. And he's like, thinks about, maybe I shouldn't knock this hard and be such a jerk, because he just saw his daughter get killed. And so he's really nice to her, and they have a good time. And she's like, you promise you're not going to be late for my concert? And he goes, I won't be late. So we go back to the same school scene. Teacher saying the same thing. We're going to rehearse. And she's like, I don't know why we're rehearsing. My dad just texted me, and he said he's not coming. And she's like, well, maybe there's a chance. And she goes, no, there isn't. And right as she's about to get up and reenact the running out of the classroom scene, he shows up to save the day. And she's like, Dad, I thought you weren't coming. And he goes, I wouldn't miss it. And then you see what the movie was really about. It was an advertisement for Rewind, the button that lets you rewind your life. Available now. How much is life worth to you? So I disguised a holiday movie as a commercial for an item at Christmas.
Huh.
Isn't that great?
I'm somewhat confused. I'm going to need to see this.
You and the rest of the world can see it very soon. I will let you know when it's available, because if we make the top 15 films, we'll be up for an Audience Choice Award, and I'll need your votes. So...
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Did we not just do a show recently about you being all upset about award shows and people coming in their own categories and voting for...
Did we do that?
What the what?
Now
you're asking our audience
I don't remember
to be
that.
voting for your movie? Wow. Okay. We're still going to vote for his movie because,
please.
That's how this works here in our world. But I just
made
wanted
the
to
movie
remind
for like
him.
$50, okay?
I just wanted to remind him that it was he who was begging on all of the award shows.
Okay. Imagine you work for a company like Best Buy, and you have an award show. I can't believe we're going back to this.
I'm
Are you going to sit and watch Best Buy Employee of the Year, best performance by a customer service rep on television? Are you going to watch that?
No, but I am
That's
going
my
to
point.
do it. But I am going to do it with the best
Why?
movies of the year.
Why?
Because I'm interested in movies. I'm not necessarily interested in what happens at Best Buy. I want to go to movies every single
Maybe
Tuesday.
you shop at Best
we
Buy and
go
it affects
to
your
movies.
experience.
No, I want to listen to music.
But you understand why I'm. It's
no.
it's like Best Buy having an award show on television and people watching it. That's what the award shows are.
No. I 100%
Why are you making
disagree.
me go through this again?
Because I disagree with you. I 100%, as I watched the Country Music Awards or the whatever it was the other day where Dolly Parton and all of the girls came out, it was a spectacular show. And I thought in my head, if Nick had been watching this, you would have loved it because they brought all the 90s country acts back. And so Pam Tillis and Kathy Mattel and all these people from the 90s did their snippets of their biggest hits. And so it was a fantastic show to watch.
We're not here
because
to talk
it was
about that.
all of the people that we love,
We were talking about me.
including Garth Brooks, who took Entertainer of the Year.
Yeah, I heard a lot of people were upset about that because he's not, really
He
out
is.
there as much as like somebody like Carrie Underwood who spends
Yeah, but it's still Garth
250
Brooks.
dates on the road,
We've
and
been to
Garth
that
does
show,
like 12
man.
shows a year and gets.
They're outstanding. They're outstanding.
Why? Wait,
Anyway,
we were talking about my movie.
So when Nick's movie comes out, we're
I'm
all
gonna put it
going
up
to
on-
vote for it.
I'm gonna put it up on Sharpie Nation, Fancounters on Facebook, and my Twitter, our Twitter, Fancounters Live, and then you'll be able to watch it, and then you can vote for it right away. Now, if you win, you win. Then it's over, right?
There's no award show? Because I want to come to that.
There's no award show. But the winner does get their film screened at the Cannes Film Festival in France. But if you're second place through 16th place, you have to win audience choice to get screened. So that's when I might need help.
Okay. Looking forward to seeing it.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to say about that.
Okay.
Now that we're completely off topic, not talking about me anymore, we might as well move into our guest, who we also don't talk about me. And that would be Cindy Begel. She's on the show this week. The interview comes courtesy of our friends over at the Leave It to Beaver Facebook group.
Dun, dun, dun.
Brian Nelson Jr. is going to be with me on this interview. Elizabeth was not here for it. Now, if you don't know Cindy Begel, I don't blame you. She is a writer who wrote on some classic TV shows like Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Mork and Mindy, Joni Loves Chachi,
One of my
Give Me a
favorites.
Break, The New Leave It to Beaver, Mama's Family, Head of the Class, Married with Children, The Martin Short Show, and most recently she was a writer on Muppet Babies, the revival series on one of those kids' channels. So we are going to hear some great experiences from Cindy. She's got a lot of good stories because
I
not
bet
only
she
when you're
does.
writing these episodes, you're on set filming them.
Yeah.
So you get to experience these actors like Robin Williams and Fonzie, and we talk about all that stuff on today's show.
I'm looking forward to hearing it.
It is a two-parter, so we're going to be back with her again next week. But for now, enjoy part one of our conversation with Cindy Begel.
Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is Fancounters with Nick and Elizabeth on the Podfix Network.
There was this mob of people, and they're screaming my name.
Crazy fans.
Stop following me. Don't come around my house. If you do, the cops are going to be at yours. If I'm having dinner with my wife, don't sit down at my table. Don't follow me into the bathroom. Can I take a picture? We're going to, oh my God.
I think this guy wants to fight me. Ended up being a fan.
I'm the only one that's ever been on Sam Jackson and lived to tell about it.
Well, guess what? I have a big surprise for you.
That's why we call it Fancounters.
I don't think you're going to last on the air very long.
Hello?
Hi, Cindy. This is Brian Nelson.
Hi, Brian.
I'm Nick. I actually host the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast, and we're going to kind of co-interview and put you out to two different audiences.
Well, sounds good to me.
All right, Brian, why don't you lead it off?
We have spoken through Facebook, through the group, and you had mentioned that you had worked for several different shows. One of them, obviously, is the new Leave It to Beaver. And when I did some research for your career, I did check the IMDb site. Unfortunately, I know it has more, but like you said, it's incomplete. It only had 2 of the episodes that you did on New Leave It to Beaver. I know you did several.
What happens is IMDb has 2 websites. One is MDB, open to the public, and one is IMDb Pro. IMDb Pro has the right credits, and that's what the professionals use. I don't know. It's like that on every show I've ever worked with, or anybody that I know. The credits aren't exactly right. But like also in mine, if you put if you click on IMDb and you go to, I think it's crew, it'll have my producing credits. I wouldn't exactly put that. I don't know how they figure that out. It'll say producer of and the credits. So I don't know.
It can be a very trustworthy site and untrustworthy depending on who's putting in the information and how complete they put it in.
Absolutely. But I mean, as far as Beaver goes, I mean, some of the titles I remember, and I could tell you, I don't even know what's on the site. I just kind of just know from memory some of them. I don't remember all of them because there's no place for me to look it up. I was trying to look up yesterday. It lists all the Beaver episodes, but doesn't necessarily list the writers.
Before we get to more detail about that, one of the things that I wanted to know, and I've looked over your resume, which is just so impressive to be involved in so many iconic television shows. When did your professional writing career first start, and what led you in the direction of TV writing?
I did not know I wanted to be a writer. In college, I was a phys ed major. I was good in sports.
Okay.
And I was probably always good in writing, but I don't think anybody would know that it was a career, especially if you're a kid. You know, what's funny is I just watched an original Leave It to Beaver episode where his teacher asks what the kids want to be, and Beaver says he wants to be a writer. So, I thought that was funny that's the one I picked to watch today. So what happened was when I was 17, I was at a women's liberation march, believe it or not. And I was picked. Somebody shoved me into a reporter, and I was interviewed on Eyewitness News. And so when I went home and I saw it, I thought, I would like to be a broadcast journalist. I just thought that was like the coolest job, that you could be behind the scenes and you can meet people.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened was I joined when I went to college. I was a phys ed major, but I joined the radio station and the newspaper, and I started writing, and I really liked it. And I worked for a television station, small television station, and I did some reporting. And then what happened was TV news changed, where they started to do a lot of live reporting,
mm-hmm.
and I could not memorize large chunks of things, and I kind of knew that was not going to be really a job for me as far as television reporting. So after I graduated college, I went to graduate school, and I wanted to do broadcast journalism, but the school didn't really have any of those classes. They had writing for television, media. So I took a class called Writing for Media, and in that you could write 30 pages of anything. And I picked a Laverne and Shirley script, which had just gotten on the air. And when I was a kid, I always liked I Love Lucy, and that was kind of the closest thing
mm-hmm.
to I Love Lucy. And there was a guy who came to class, and he was a producer. And I went up to him, and I said, I have this script, and could you give it to Gary Marshall? Why I thought he knew him, why I thought he would give it to him, I don't know. And, of course, he lied and said yes. So, but I was happy. I was like, so he took my script, and I never heard from him. So I called up information, and I just asked for Beverly Hills, and I asked for him, and I called him at home.
Oh, my gosh.
Said,
those are the days.
Yeah, that's kind of for anybody that wants to be anything, you should do what I did. It's just you have to, ignore the sick feeling in your stomach and do it anyway. So I called him, and he said, of course, yeah, I gave it to him. And, of course, I believed him. And, of course, nothing happened.
Right.
And then what happened was I was working in the college that I was going to graduate school, and I had a vacation, and I asked everybody I knew, did they know anybody who worked in show business and television, anything. And I had a bunch of people who had a cousin or a hairdresser's cousin, and I took a bunch of names. And at that point, I think I had 2 scripts. And I was very confident that my scripts were really good. And I had no clue. Maybe they weren't that good, but I thought they were very good. And there was a teacher that said to me, it's really unlikely that you'll make it, because I went out there and I didn't make it. He said, but if anybody could, it would be you. But I thought, well, his luck's not my luck.
That's right.
And like I said, at that point, I didn't know whether my scripts were good or bad. Probably like any beginner, really. And so when I went out to LA, I did call a bunch of people, and my mother knew somebody whose nephew was a writer on Laverne and Shirley. Because that was the best connection, I called that last because I was scared. So that one I called, and the wife said, "Why don't you come over and bring your script?" So I went over. I left the script in the car because I thought it might be a little too forward to walk into people's houses that I didn't know waving a script. So her husband, who was the nephew of my mother's friend, has become is a very, very well-known writer. His name is Babalu Mandel, and besides Laverne and Shirley, his partner co-created Laverne and Shirley, and they wrote Night Shift and Parenthood and Splash, and just hit after hit after hit. But that was very early in his career. And he gave it to his boss, who was Lowell Gans, who I said was the co-creator of Laverne and Shirley. And he liked the script and had me come in and meet with him and go over my work with me. And I mean, that was a very exciting thing to me. So before I go on, that's the genesis of how I ended up wanting to be a writer and just kind of following some paths that I made up for myself. Nowadays, people have the internet and there are a lot of writing classes in colleges, and they're much more savvy. I was, but the competition was less also. When I met with Lowell, he did not have my script with him, but he knew it. He knew scene by scene, which was absolutely amazing. Lowell is like a genius. To this day, I don't think I've ever met a writer as smart and as funny as he is. But one of the things he said to me, he said, "You have no idea what a story is." He said, "Your story is about 5 different things." And he said, "You need to have one theme, and you need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the middle, you need to go, uh-oh." And the reason for people, that's, when regular television was very popular, it would be like a 2-act structure. You'd have the big commercial in the middle. Mm-hmm. I mean, we still have that, but there are a lot of different kinds of shows now. And so it would be, uh-oh. And so he gave me notes, very detailed notes. So he actually gave me the clues of how to write a good script. He said, but what you have that a lot of people don't have is you're funny. And he said, you can't teach funny. People either are funny or they're not funny. So he said, you have that. You have the raw talent. So the other stuff he said you can learn. You can learn format. That's, So I went back home and I committed to being a television writer. And I kept writing. And I moved out the following year. I saved up my money. And I moved out and I moved to L.A. and I lived in a fraternity house in the summer because it was really cheap. And the guys all go home during the summer.
Where did you move out there from?
I moved out from New York.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yes, I moved out from New York and I got my degree. I actually just had a thesis to write. And the thesis that I wrote was Laverne and Shirley, analysis of a sitcom. And then I used the notes that Lowell had given me to criticize my own work. So what happened was he said to me, I have 3 pilots, and if any sell, I'll put you on as an apprentice writer. We used to have that at Paramount. They were called apprentice writers. And none of his pilots sold. They made the pilots, but they never went to series.
Right.
And then he had some other shows, and then there was a cousin that got on, and so then what happened was it was 10 months later, and I hadn't been home in 10 months, which is, when you're 24 is kind of a big deal. And I went home and I felt very defeated. And I was still writing, and I had better and better scripts, obviously, because I was learning. And Babalu gave my script to a guy named Ron Levitt, and Ron Levitt eventually created Married with Children. But at this point was he gave my script and he had a show. I didn't know any of this was happening, and I was home in New York, and Ron called my house and said, got my father and said, ask her if she wants a job on a, a TV show, and it was called The Bad News Bears. It was a TV version of the film version.
Mm-hmm.
The first, they've done remakes a couple of times. And so it was like, yeah, that's like the best thing ever. And it was done at Paramount, and I would be paid $165 a week as an apprentice writer. And I thought it was like $1 million. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And that was I went back, and that was my first job.
Were you worried about having to write lines? Because I'm assuming if the TV series is like the movie, you're writing for little boys. Were you worried about getting what boys would say, like, right in your script? Did that make you nervous?
Well, yeah, the interesting thing is that show, the picture was a girl. It was about a girl on a boys' team. And if you go back, remember what I said, I was a phys ed major. So I always played sports with boys.
Okay.
So that was just one of these fluky things that was the one area I really knew and I knew baseball. I don't know it now, but I knew it then.
Okay.
So that was like, that was like the perfect job for me. And the thing there was something that's similar between that show and the new Leave It to Beaver is that it was a single camera comedy, which meant it's shot like a movie, not in front of an audience on location, not only on the stage, but on location.
Mm-hmm.
So they're very short scenes, when you watch a movie, it cuts to different things. It's done in a little different way. And I had no idea. I had no training. I had nothing. But remember, we were apprentice writers, and there were 2 other apprentice writers at the same time. And they taught you what to do. But, still, they give you a scene, they tell you what it's about, and you have to go off by yourself and write it when you've never written anything before. But they walk you through it. They so that you're not just looking at a blank page. They will say, in this scene, up at the top, somebody's cooking eggs. They will tell you but they won't give you all the jokes, and that's where you have to come up with the spaces. They'll give you a couple so that you could write to those jokes. So yeah, it's pretty scary. And then what's going to happen is after you write that, and you're given a short amount of time, you might be given as a new writer, maybe they give you 2 hours to do it or something,
wow.
3 hours. Mm-hmm.
That's very short.
Very short. And then what's really scary, but of course I didn't know this was going to happen, is they're going to read it in front of all the writers. They're going to read your scene out loud. And so, you've written jokes and you hope that they're good, because otherwise you're with all these professionals. I mean, you're just thrown into the fire pit, really. You just would learn like that. But they were really kind because they came up. They came through that system, so they were not going to hurt your feelings or, they were not going to do that, and they were going to teach you. They did give 3 rules. They said, do not pitch. And this was, remember, this is back in 79. Do not pitch a Dolly Parton joke. Do not pitch, it's a close encounter of a whatever kind.
Mm-hmm.
Don't say, what am I, chopped liver? They said your hairdresser could say that. You're a professional comedy writer. You need to find jokes that are professional. So, yeah, you have to really find that place within your own brain that really pushed you, because otherwise you were going to feel really silly when they read your stuff out loud.
So the first time they read your stuff out loud, how'd it go?
It went really, really good. And so then what happens is, if you hit and they really like your writing, they start giving you more and more scenes to write by yourself. If you're a writer that is maybe, not coming back with what they want, they might pair you with somebody.
Okay.
So I wasn't paired with anybody. They trusted me because they can't afford you to come back with something they can't use, because the thing about a one-camera show is it shoots every day. Mm-hmm. Too. Now it depends where you are in the season, of course. But sometimes they might give you something. They'll say the scene's not working. We need it for tomorrow. Or you might be a couple of weeks ahead. But you can't afford not to do what they ask, because it slows down the whole process. And time is money, a lot of money, even then.
Earlier, when we first started talking about this subject, you had brought up working with Robin Williams.
Yeah. So what would happen is when I worked at Paramount, it was a really special time because the 80s was also the heyday in a lot of ways for comedy, family comedies, as the 50s were. But the 80s really was fantastic for writers. So I worked for Gary Marshall. Not that show was not his, but the second show I worked on was Laverne and Shirley, which is a weird story, I could tell you. But once you worked on a lot there, if a show was canceled, you were put on another show. If they liked you, they would say they'd call your agent. At that point, I had an agent, and then they would say, we'd like to offer this. So you just kept working. So it was like maybe, I don't know if it was my fourth show, maybe. I was put on Mork and Mindy, and also what would happen is a lot of the same writers would be on the show. So I also knew the executive producer. It ended up it was the same executive producer from The Bad News Bears was Mork and Mindy. So I was brought on to that show. So yeah, that's how I ended up on Mork and Mindy. And what also happened was along the way, there was a pilot, and I was on Laverne and Shirley, and they needed a couple of writers. And there was another woman, a writer named Lisa Kite, and they said we need help on this pilot, and we both volunteered. So they said, well, you could go off and help them for a week. And then what happened was they started offering us jobs together. So that's how we ended up being partners. And so on Mork and Mindy, I worked with a partner. I didn't work on a partner with every show, but most of my career was with a partner.
Brian Levant, he worked on Happy Days, which you did as well. I'm assuming
and
that's
Mork and Mindy and The Bad News Bears.
Is that how you got? I'm guessing that's how you got the New Leave It to Beaver writing credits.
That's true.
All right, and then you were working with Lisa Kite. You were talking earlier about how your writing was appreciated for the humor that was in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When we interviewed Tony Dow a few weeks ago, he had brought that up that you stuck out for that very same reason.
That's really nice.
Yeah, and
really,
it was really neat. Yeah,
nice.
Is that Cindy?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, she's great. She's terrific. She had a writing partner. I can't remember what her writing. You remember what her writing partner's name was?
Lisa Kite.
Exactly. They wrote a lot of good shows. Cindy was a real kick.
He's a doll. He's great. And
yeah.
The whole cast. That was the nicest cast of practically any show I ever worked on, I think. And the other thing that was fun about that show also was that it was allowed to be edgy. And that was in the original Leave It to Beaver also. The kids were allowed to do wrong things. Mm-hmm. There were jokes. There were things that, it was a crossover. Adults could watch it also, mm-hmm. as well as kids. It wasn't like, it wasn't a babyish kind of show. And they also dealt with kids' feelings too, which is really good. But you could do real jokes, and so I always liked humor, definitely. I would say when I was a young writer, I definitely wasn't very strong on story, meaning like making a story make sense from beginning to end. And my partner was better at that, and she was also very funny, but us together, we were able to really, come up with good stories and good characters and jokes. So sometimes, it's good to have a partner because of what you lack, somebody else it might be their strength. Nobody does everything.
What does that writing session look like when you're with a partner? Are you kind of both doing something on your own and then you come together? Or are you really going through the script? Okay, what would this person say? Who would jump in here? Are you doing it as a team or are you separate and then together? How does that work?
Well, you know what? I think like most teams, we probably tried every which way to see which was the best way to work. And our method probably evolved over the years because we became better writers. So in the beginning, how we would do it is, they would say come up with stories, right? So you're just sitting around and mostly talking about stuff that happened to you, especially if it's a kid's show. You would say, something like, my brother snuck out my tennis racket, and it was a very weird kind of brand, and then he broke it. And now he had to try to find another brand, the same thing, to put it back with me not knowing. I mean, that's a kind of an example. So I might say that to her, but I don't have a whole story, right? I just have that germ of an idea. And then, we start to talk about it, and you try to think of what would be the big fun scene, like 3/4 of the way through, whether it's a single camera show or in front of an audience, what's going to be that really fun scene. And then what'll happen is a lot of television writing is written backwards. So when you have your, this is what's going to happen. And then you try to think, how could we get there? And so you start filling in the pieces. So we would do something like that, and then we would have our story. Then what we would do is they do something that's called a pitch, whether it's between two writers or maybe yourself, or you're working on staff. They come up with a pitch. So in other words, before you write it, you go through what all your scenes are, and you put a couple of jokes so that you know where the fun is and the funny things, so that when you go to write it, you really kind of know what that scene is going to be and where the fun is.
Okay.
And so with us, what we would do at that point is we would do an outline, like breaking down the scenes. And then on some shows, they would ask you for a formal outline. Most of them did ask you for a formal outline. So you would write, depending upon what show it was. Some people wanted a few pages, some wanted 10 pages, some wanted they wanted everything in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we would do is sometimes we would just start together and, one person be the one writing it down. And then we'd say, fade in, interior bedroom, and then you have to think, what are they doing? They have to come up with something to look at. Remember, it's visual, right? Mm-hmm. And then we would sometimes do it like that. As we got to be better writers, because we also had a sense of trusting the other person, we would do the exact same thing, but like she might take act 1 and I might take act 2.
Okay.
And then we would write it separately and then exchange, come up with notes of what you like, what you think should be changed, and then rewrite together. And
nice.
As we got more experienced, we started to know that what was going to come back was going to be very close to what it should be. In the beginning of our careers, you'd rewrite and rewrite and rewrite, and it would just change so much. But not towards the end of the career, because you kind of knew how to do the job.
Right.
So most people want either of those ways. They either divide, but everybody knows what's in the other person's half.
And are you writing with a budget in mind, or are you worried about, hey, how are they going to pull this off, or are you just writing it?
It's all set before you write it, and you're told. Sometimes you'll write, you think of something funny, and you go in and you say, can we do this? And then they have to check whether they can do that or not, and they might say yes or
right.
no. But you can't suddenly put them at the beach. You can't. You can't do that. There have been some shows where they go to the beach, but if it's not a beach show,
you're not going to the beach.
Yeah, you have to stay within what they're telling you. But sometimes you might think of some kind of prop or an idea or something, and then they'll let you know. But yeah, they really do watch the budget. That's a big part of it. Like, let's say, for instance, they said something like, we want them to go to a restaurant. They have to tell you, and they check with a line producer, can we have a Chinese restaurant? And sometimes they'll say, we don't have the space for a set, because remember, a lot of times you duplicate it on a stage. They're not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So they might say, you could have a counter with 3 seats. You have parameters, definitely.
Okay, that's interesting. I always wondered how you knew what you could write and what locations to use and all that.
Yeah, like if you give me the example, like something like when we did the new Leave It to Beaver, we really had we had a lot of stuff on a stage, and it's very, very cool to see the interiors on a stage that, you know, they connect. In a show in front of a studio audience, it's like watching a play. So the sets are next to each other. You know, it doesn't have any one room isn't real, like is next to the other, but in a one camera show, the camera's going through the house. Mm-hmm. So it actually will kind of be set up that way. And so, you know, they in front of like a studio audience, the stage is the size that it is. And you might say, oh, we really need them doing something. So they might have what they would call a swing set, and it'd be something that's temporary for that week. And again, it has to be budgeted. Sometimes they would say to us, we have to do a show. We have no money. It has to be the sets that we have, and come up with something.
Good luck.
Yeah. But what I was going to say, you'll appreciate this, I think, about the new Leave It to Beaver. There was a line that was in a throwaway line that Eddie Haskell once said, and it was to Freddie Haskell, and at the time it was not planned what the future was going to be, but he talked about, you know, you'll be sent away like your brother.
Yes,
and
I remember that.
The joke was he spilled grape juice on a white rug.
Uh-huh.
It was just a throwaway joke. And if you believe the character Eddie Haskell, you probably thought he probably did send his kid away for spilling grape juice on a white rug. And what happened was one day Ken Osmond brought his younger son to the set, Christian, who they called Bomber. That was his name in real life. And he looked exactly like his dad. And so Brian Levant said, we gotta write for him. And he never acted, nothing. You know, he said he'll be able to do it. I'm sure he'll be able to do it. And he said, we're going to send Freddie to military school. And his brother will be at the military school. And it was really funny. I mean, he had this whole thing in his head, and it was very funny. And so we would, you know, you have to come up with the crime that Freddie committed. We sent away to military school. And I can't even tell you.
I could tell you what it was.
What it is. I'd have to see.
I don't
remember that part.
I could tell you what it was. It was.
Okay, what was it?
He gave money to the Cleaver kids because the Cleaver kids busted
the car.
Mary Ellen's window.
Yeah.
And so Eddie gave Freddie some money to give to a bookie to bet on a horse. And Freddie, knowing what the chances of the winning was, he was like, this money will be gone anyway, so I'll help the kids with it, and it won't be a big deal. Well, it turned out that horse ended up winning. It lost $3,000. It would have won him $3,000. So when he said, he's like, I'm rich. He came in the house, and he's like, I'm rich. And so he asked Freddie, you know, if he put the money down. He's like, no, I didn't give the money. The Cleavers were in a bind, so I felt knowing the history of the horse as he did, he was like, I was pretty secure that it was going to be okay to give them the money, and so so yeah, that's where that storyline was. But
well, you know, it's funny because we wrote that one, but it's a long
30 years ago.
Time ago. I know, I feel silly, but it's, you know, it's a long 19. I don't know if it was before 86. It might have been before. No, I think it was that. Probably was 86. But what I do remember about it, which was really funny, was Brian said, you know, let's get a bus. You know, that we're going to put him on a bus, like this farewell scene. You know, and like make it really like sad that you know he has his gear and he's going to go on the bus. So remember, and it sounded really good. And then they hired a very young Christina Applegate, who was only 14 years old. And it's like, I guess some girl who sees him off, and he goes, let's make it rain. We said we can make it rain. He goes, yeah, we can make it rain. We'll get rain machines and a wind machine. We could do that. We could actually do that. They had a wind machine that's like the size of a house, like a 2-story house. This giant wind machine, and it was a great scene, and they really went all out. And then the thing that we were going to do is they had to build, the room that Bomber was in, and the twist was going to be that his brother, was like the big cheese at military school. And I think when Freddie walks in, they're hanging some kid out the window by their ankles. Is kind of what I remember.
It was actually Freddie that was getting hung out the window. And
was it him? Was it him? Okay.
And then Bomber came in there, and then he told him to knock him. Then they grabbed him out of the window, and then he noticed that it was Freddie, and it was real big surprise. Yeah.
Right, and then he had like a little bar set up, right? That it was like, I think it was just like sodas or something, right? The Bomber had some.
Yeah.
It was really a cute episode. The kids did. This kid had no acting experience, and he was really good. And he looked just like his dad. He looked just like him. He was a pretty young kid, too, at that point, I remember. And, I really like that. I love that episode. And another episode that I really liked was a Haskell episode, was called A Boy and His Snake. I like that one, too. I don't know if you remember that. It was that.
Oh, yeah. Freddie's snake is dying. And Eddie is real insensitive about it, and he wants to stay home with the snake. And Eddie wasn't very compassionate about it. And
no, he said, "Get me a hammer."
He said, "We're taking him to a vet." Yeah, and the Gert was a little more sympathetic and frustrated with Eddie, and then Eddie showed at the end that he had a heart, and he was trying to be soft-hearted. Got him a dog,
That's right.
It was.
Wolf.
Yeah.
Old Wolf. You see, that was also Brian. Definitely, he always would still go for pathos and emotion, and underneath it all, Eddie. They would say that on the original one. And he said, "Don't tell anybody. I don't want to ruin my reputation." That underneath it, he's touched. He looks at the pictures, slides of his kid, right when he's little, and he's touched. Also, was that the military school one? I don't remember, when he's looking at slides.
We've been talking about some of your favorite memories on a show. I want to talk to you about one of my favorite memories of some work that you did and get a little bit of a inside story, because I think there is one to tell, whether you want to tell it or not. It's hard not to notice on your credits an amazing film credit that you have, because you were one of the 35 writers of the Flintstones movie. It was a film that took over 9 years to make and get it to theaters, and I was a huge fan of the movie. I know that some people loved it and hated it. I loved it. I think it's a classic, and I've already showed my kids this movie.
Wow.
So I am a fan. So what do you remember about being on that team of writers of 35 people that it went through to get this film on screen? What can you tell me?
Yeah, sure. I can tell you that. That one, what happened was Universal paid for some very big writers to do various versions of the script. And it wasn't a movie that they wanted to make. So, not saying the scripts were bad, but it wasn't something that they were willing to go ahead with. And what happened was Brian Levant was hired as a director. And he's very particular about the kind of a script that he wanted to shoot and what kind of story he wanted to shoot.
Okay.
And he hired a bunch of television writers it was 3 days. And they're all people that I know that have worked on various television shows at different points. And they came up with a story that they liked. Then I was hired with 7 other people to write the script that Brian wanted, and done it. So in other words, they already had, the way I told you, the scenes broken down. And the movie's a lot longer, and they have what's called a storyboard and it's like a big bulletin board, and they take cards, and they, a lot of people still do it like that. It's a very old-fashioned way because you can do it. There's all these programs that you can use, but there's something that's kind of cool about looking at this big board, and it would be each of the scenes in columns so that you can see where you're going and what's coming up, right? So when I got there, they had this storyboard, and so what the idea was is in 10 days was to write the entire script. So it would be like 10 pages a day. Would
That's
be the goal.
a huge feat.
It was, and because what happened was they had a green light to so they needed a script really fast. That's why it was done like that. I'm sure, like you said, it was a lot of hurry up and wait for all those years. I mean, I didn't know a whole lot. There were various scripts, versions of different things that were there, but all I knew was this storyboard that they had come up with, and there was a guy that got credit originally for that story.
Right.
His name was Michael Wilson. And again, I was not there. I don't know where that story came from. That was before me getting there and before them having a script. So what the idea was to work from 10 to 10 for 10 days. I don't know why the number 10 kept coming up, but that was
like, well, you got to get 10 pages a day. You can work 10 to 10.
Yeah.
That way you don't forget.
And, no, I remember sitting there, and it's, sometimes it's like the best place you could ever be is in a writer's room when it's cooking and it's fun, and you get they pick really funny, smart people. And then you get to a point in the script where everybody's tired or nobody knows where to go in the story, and you can sit there for 3 hours or 5 hours with like nothing, So it's a very unique experience, really, and you have that pressure that it has to be done, and it has to be done the best that you can do that. So what happened was, obviously, and there are different people that are good at different things. Like, for instance, there was one guy on staff. He was really good at doing the Flintstones play on words.
Okay. All the rock stuff and the pebble and
Yeah, so they sent him off and said, come up with as many things that you could come up with of those kind of things. So he did, instead of Marshall Field, Marshy Field. Liz Claiborne was Liz Claybone. I mean, he was so good at it. So that we had this Bible, and he was a kind of a quiet person too. So it was like really cool that was one of the things he was just so wonderful at that a lot of people weren't that good at. So we had a Bible of things that we could just slot in if Chev Rock, whatever it was going to be. So, and there was another guy, like at the end of the movie, they have that big sort of log thing, right? That looks like a roller coaster, right? At the very end. And there was one guy, he was an animation writer. He was also a regular television writer, but he was very visual. Animation writers are incredibly visual about how things work and move. So he was really, this one guy, very instrumental on how we're going to get, and the dangers that were going to happen to those two kids that were in that log or whatever it was. So, so different people have different skills. And Brian Levant, being a writer and the director, is the head of the table, and he moves the table along, and he's the one that decides, what we'll look, says what we need and what we're looking for, and he's very funny himself. He's like a joke machine, and so and so what happens is he'll say, we need here. I'll give you a good example of it was a joke that because I'll remember it because it was my joke. Not that I had that many. There were people that had way more input than I did. But this was what the situation was. So there's a point when there's a room of the bad guy, and there's a bunch of people, and Fred is going to come. They need him to come in late. They need him to be the last one to come in. Mm-hmm. So the setup is, where was Fred? and people just are pitching ideas, and so I pitched, sorry I'm late. I ran over a nail. And then he holds up his foot because remember he,
he's barefoot.
Exactly. And so that got in, and that's pretty cool. And it was really cool. They used that in the commercial. And I was like, whoa, that was like,
wow.
And he also changed it. He said, I picked up a nail, and I thought, no, it should have been I ran over. But obviously it was fine. John Goodman's little change to it was fine. But okay, but that's the whole day is like that. Is we're looking for this, we're looking for that.
Okay.
What's the next? So anyway, so what happened was we finished the script, and we get we're done, and we get a letter from each of us got a letter from Universal that said we were very excited. Thank you for this script. We're very excited that this is the script that we want to make, and they make posters. Like coming in May, and they put these giant posters in all the theaters around the country. My parents saw it in their hometown and said, "You want us to ask the theater owner if we could have that?" It was like a 3D big mock-up.
Oh yeah.
I don't know where I would put that. So then what happened was after that was done, Brian wanted some more punching up, so he took another 8 people. And they spent a couple of days on it, and they added jokes, and they changed things. It was still basically the same script, but it was just punching up stuff like television writers. That's what they do. And then I had a couple other people look at it, put some more jokes in, but it started to get so the people that originally wrote the script prior to this group said we want to arbitrate. We should get credit. The original writers should get credit. The next guy wanted credit. Then the group after us said they wanted credit. It became this crazy. So it wasn't, you might say 35 people's hands touched the script, but it really wasn't 35 people writing a script. It was that, like on a lot of movies, there are a lot of hands, like uncredited hands,
right,
that go into it. And so what happened was the Writers Guild has rules about 8 people can't write a script and only 2 or 3 people or 4 people, whatever rule that they had. And they didn't really know what to do. And so they made a negotiation that we removed our names, that take the posters out of the theaters.
Do you still have that souvenir poster?
What?
Do you have the poster with your name on it yet?
Yes, I do.
All right.
I do.
But
it's pretty cool. And so we decided to come to a group settlement with Universal, and that we would essentially remove our names from the arbitration.
Did you feel it was fair to you that happened, or did you really were you really holding animosity about that?
At the time, there were a lot of bad feelings from everybody. Because truly, if you want to look at the contributions that people made, not everybody that made significant contributions to that got credit.
Right.
And so they had meetings at the Writers Guild that I thought were interesting. And some people said a solution could be what the English people do is they have credits at the end which just say additional writers. So, you have the people... I mean, I don't know how much their credits reflect anything either, but a lot of people at the Writers Guild were very adamant about, no, they did not want that. And what happens in arbitrations, a lot of times the original writers do get special treatment because they feel like, that's the person that started it. And then they have rules that if you've contributed 33 1/3%, then you get credit too. So a lot of times you'll see scripts and it'll say "and" rather than an ampersand. So "and" means that last person rewrote the people before
them. Yeah.
And then there could be uncredited people too. A lot of people, script doctors, and they could get $1 million and they will not have, but they know they're not. They're called writers for hire. And from the beginning, you're not going to have your name on it, but you're paid to do that. But that ended up, and nothing really changed. since that, so the people know, what it's like in television. This happens also. Somebody pitches a story, somebody else writes it, the staff rewrites it. The person that's name is on there doesn't have any contribution. This is usual, not atypical, and you all just feel like, well, it balances out somehow. Somehow. I have, everybody likes my script, but maybe I don't have anything in it, and then it's your turn. It's like that. So this was very similar. It was written television style, and it ended up that the credits do not reflect the contributions of the various writers that did have their hands on it. So
no, I did expect you to have hurt feelings. I don't want you to think I was going in the direction of that you felt slighted and you weren't supposed to have. I would have expected that. That's why I was checking.
Well, but you know what? We had the choice to proceed with an arbitration, and we chose to settle and just stop the process that was just not going to end up really good anyway. And so for me, it's a very wonderful memory. I don't have any, it's too many years. I don't have any bad feelings at all. I feel privileged that I got to work on a movie. I got to watch them shoot it.
That was my next question. Did you visit the set? And what can you tell us about, I mean, it was so magical to see the rolling cars and the, all the special effects. What was it like watching this being put together?
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that Brian Levant says now is that was probably the last movie that was not just done all in CG, because now, computer graphics, because now they would not build. They built they built Bedrock.
Bedrock, yeah.
I mean, they had two different locations that they had. They had a quarry, and then they had another location where they had the facades for all, their houses, and it's mind-blowing. They had a life-size, the dinosaur that Fred, in the quarry is on. So that what they did with that is they had the head, and then they had the tail, and it moved, and then they didn't have the middle parts.
Okay.
And that, yeah, and it was. I have a couple of pictures.
Oh, that's awesome.
I should have taken more. I don't know why I didn't. I only have a couple of pictures of being on the set. And it was beautiful. It was incredible. Now the thing that was CG animation obviously was Dino running through the house.
Okay.
That's the only way they really could do that. But it was all real and big and fantastic. And that's just torn down, taken away.
I know, that's
they
sad.
It is some sort of, I know.
There almost needs to be a set museum like Warner Brothers is doing with The Big Bang Theory, except to do it with more shows. People would pay to go through those sets. It's a moneymaker.
I know. I thought it was very, very magical. So I only have wonderful memories of it, because at the time, you're a little annoyed and stuff, but that goes away when the other stuff is just so wonderful, just to have that opportunity to work on a movie that was at the time for many years the biggest grossing movie of all time.
Yeah, it was like $360 million. That was huge.
Yeah, maybe it's like 11 now, or I think it's probably still in the top 20 somewhere. And then they did the sequel too. I remember I did not work on that. I remember going to the set and seeing Halle Berry, who I think nobody knew who she was then, thinking, wow, she's pretty.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one of your favorite movies. They recently had an anniversary showing of it in the last few months, and they had a panel with Brian Levant, and they had the cinematographer, and I think they had the set designer, and so they screened it, and then people asked questions, and boy, there were a lot of fans, and they have a lot of memorabilia that they bring, and they want autographs, and it was very, very cool to see so many years later that people still love it.
All right, we're going to stop it right here for this week. we are back in the studio, Elizabeth.
I know. That was cool. She's cool.
Yes. Lots more stories coming up next week. So make sure you tune in to Fancounters. If you have a guest that you would like to hear on the show, all you have to do is
email
one
us.
thing. Yes.
Email us at hello@fancounters.com.
Also, we're looking for those 5-star reviews.
It's not that hard, people. Click the stars. You can do it.
You can do it. Give us a nice 5-star review on any platform where you listen to podcasts. My favorite is iHeartRadio. I like how it notifies me on Monday morning of all the shows that I like that have a new episode for the week.
Nice.
So that's my favorite, but we also like iTunes reviews and that kind of thing, too.
Anything you'd like to give us would be great.
All right. So we're back next week with Cindy. And until then, have a good week.
We'll see you later, guys. Bye-bye.